Setting up an MTouch project using a Microchip PIC can be very straightforward and easy to get up and running. Capacitive touch is something that's becoming wide interest, and this is one of the modules from Microchip which allows you to play with PIC and run such library modules very quickly. So we'll have a look at setting that up. This is the one I'm using down here. You can see a live camera shot in the bottom right corner. So into MPLAB, first thing to do is set up a new project. I'll run through that quickly. It's one of the mid-range parts we're going to be using, and it's the PIC 16F18446. There's the one. Okay, we do have a tool for this, of course. It's the Curiosity board. It's not coming up at the moment, so let's plug that board in just so we can find it. Okay, see, we're all set up there, and now we should be able to identify the tool. There it is. Next, let's create a brand new folder for this. New folder. And we'll call it Touch 1. Okay, so we have a blank project all set up. These are the materials I'm going to be using. I've got a bit of FR4 with the copper on the underside. I'm not going to be using that copper for anything right now. Cut out a couple of simple buttons using copper tape, so it just shows how simple this can be. You can have this up and running in like 10 minutes, your own configuration of buttons or sliders or whatever it is you need. So here's our project. I'm going to first of all have a look at some of the resources we've got. We'll run MCC. MCC is a great configuration tool for all of the peripherals and software library modules. You can bring them all together and get them working together very quickly. So let's save the configuration file first of all into our Touch 1 project. Here's our MCC configuration utility. First thing I probably want to do is there's an LED on this board, so I'm going to use that for my output, a little yellow LED. So you should have a kit window popped up with your when you plugged in your Curiosity board. If you didn't, if you have a look at window on here and kit window, you can bring up that window for the board, and on here we have different user guides, schematics, data sheets and examples, all very useful. Have a look at the schematics window, and on here you can see that our LED is actually on RA2. Okay, we've got a lot of other good stuff going on as well, but this is all we're interested in for now. So let's set that LED up on RA2 and set it to an output. Okay, and on the pin module, there it is. We're going to give that a name. I'm going to call it Y LED. Don't need analog. Happy with that. There's our LED. Okay, so now we're going to add in an MTouch module. All we're going to have is touch and an LED. Down at the bottom, there's our module. We're going to click the green cross to bring that into our project resources available. You can see it's also brought in the ADCC. The ADCC is used by the CVD to gather data and report it back. Make sure that that's set up properly. I'm going to increase the clock frequency up to 8 MHz, divide by 1. Oh, got a little warning popped up then. The ADCC hint. It's running a little bit fast for the ADCC, so we're going to lower the clock frequency for that module. Let's find it. ADCC, there it is. And now we're going to make it divide by 4. No, it didn't go away, it's still there. Make it divide by 8. There it goes. Okay, so it's now happy with the speed the ADCC is running at. So we'll have a look now at the MTouch module. We can start off by adding sensors. We're going to use 2 sensors and use them in button mode. So let's start by adding those. says to create hardware sensors, assign the CS pins in the pin manager grid view. That's down here. We go to here, and because we've brought in our MTouch module, there it is, and there are the CS pins. Let's put them onto a couple of the pins along this edge here so we can access them easily. C2 and C0, I think. C2 can be a touchpad. It's giving us a warning that we need to make some changes to our code. It jumps to the notification page, and it's saying that we need to place this command, this function call, into our main loop. That's the API which tells the touch routine to service the sensors, make sure they're all up to date. So we'll remember to add that later into our loop. Okay, we're going to add a second one. Let's go for C0. There's a warning again. And if we look up here, we've got our two sensors. I'm going to give them a name rather than use that long name. I'm going to call them sensor note and sensor 1. Okay, we need to add some buttons to those, so we can create some new buttons, 2 new buttons. Simply add those in. It will pick up the sensors that we've created already. You can see here we've got the 2 sensors created, the 2 buttons have been created. No other features are needed at this point. We don't need to change any of the parameters. We're happy with the basic thresholds of the sensors, so we can go ahead with that. I'm going to generate and see what we get. Okay, generation complete. All happy so far. So if we go back to our project listing we had at the beginning, have a look at main C. We've got a main has been created, nothing else in there at the moment, and we've got under our MCC generated files lots of different folders. Here's our MTouch stuff we're interested in, and here we've got a load of different MTouch API files and so on for buttons and sensors should we want to interact with those. Now the first thing I always like to do is just to make sure that everything is running when I expect it to be running. So in the main, I'm going to add, just before it calls the while one loop, the main loop it will run through, I'm going to just add a couple of LED flashes, so give me an indication that all is good. So it's called yellow, set low. It was a pull down, so we're going to set that LED low to turn it on. Small delay. This is one of the built-in commands. Quick flash. Happy with that. Set it high again. Set it high. Okay, I'm going to pause again. For a longer period. I'm going to do that twice. One of these fancy loops for me, just to duplicate that code. Okay, so this is enough just to get us going and make sure that the project is talking to the board. Download that. Now this is where we need to add a little bit of a command to our builder. We go on to the dashboard and open that up. You can see here we've got some options for configuring the compiler, the builder, and lots of other things. Go on to building. This I showed this in a previous video. You can actually set up the compiler, the IDE, to tell it to download the code automatically once it's built. So put that command in here. It is cp $ open curly braces image path close braces, and tell it which drive that popped up in your file manager when you plugged your board in. In this case, on my machine, it was G:, and that will copy the hex file over into that folder and cause the board to run immediately. Okay, let's try that. Let's try and build. We're looking for a double blip on the LED just to show that all is well. That's good enough. Now don't forget we needed to add that piece of code API to service the MTouch function. It was MTouch service main loop. So if you go into your main code and enter that now, MTouch. Now you just hit Control and space, by the way. You do see these. Hit it the second time for all of the options. Scroll down, looking for MTouch service. MTouch service main loop. Here it is. That's going to provide us with our up-to-date sampling of the sensors. The other thing we need to do, usually I tend to forget this, but you always need to include this, is that the ADC is going to be used to provide the sampling. That's how the capacitive coupling works into the PIC. And so you need to enable the interrupts to allow that to run as well. So just uncomment those lines, global and peripheral interrupt lines, to enable those. Now all I want to do is get data from my buttons I've created, and should the button be touched, light an LED. Let's go back to our main loop here. We've serviced the MTouch function, and we want to add MTouch. Let's take a quick look at the header files just to see which particular function might be of interest to us. So we're going to the header file. Let's look for the MTouch section here. Probably we don't want to bother with sensor data. You can get very high resolution readings from sensor data, but for us for now, all touching a button is good enough. Am I touched or am I not touched? Scroll down. Here you can see where we defined our buttons, button 0 and button 1. That's good. We're looking for one of the functions that returns a Boolean as opposed to a analog data value. So the Boolean, here we are. MTouch button is pressed, so we're going to use that function. Let's copy that back to our main, paste it in, and the button we're going to look at first is button 0. We can type that out as button 0 or just use a 0 as we saw. If MTouch button is pressed, button 0, then we want to set our LED on. Simple. We also want to do that for the second button, which was button 1. Okay, we've got two buttons being read. Either of those being touched will result in the LED being on. So let's turn it off prior to that. LED, let's set it high. And I'm going to put a small delay in there. We don't want it running too fast. We won't be able to give the processor time to do other things normally. So small delay of 20 milliseconds or so. Okay, that's pretty much our code finished. Run around the loop, service the MTouch channels, turn the LED off. Let's have a look what's going on with the buttons. Turn it on if something's happening. Wait and do it all again. Now we need to have a look at some hardware. Let's set the hardware up very quickly. Okay, we've got a simple board made up. Let's plug that in. There's our double flash. We're happy with that. And touching one of the sensors now will cause the button to illuminate. That's a very simple touch demonstration. What I would also be interested in doing is putting in an inline resistor with those copper strips, the traces going to the button. That does provide a lot of help with shielding from RFI. And also I would probably want to include a driven shield. So the underside of the board is copper. I would add a driven shield output, and I might even put a ring around the buttons as well if I needed to guard against fingers touching both buttons and causing some sort of interference. Then you can protect against that. In the next video, I'll have a look at reading that sensor data and have a look at how we can output that to something more usable than an LED, maybe terminal or a GUI.